I'm Ross Tregenza. I don't know why I paused like I didn't know then. I'm a composer and sound designer for video games. Most recently, Texas Chain Saw Massacre, Deathloop, Cyberpunk, Wolfenstein, and others. And I always feel like people don't really know the different jobs that there are in the games industry and the distinctions between them. And it's a quiet Sunday, so I thought, why not make myself a little list, and we can talk through each of those like sub jobs and what it means to do them, and let's go through. So I think the biggest and first distinction to be made is sound designer and musician. Like I'll quite often be looking for a new sound designer to join our team at Sumo Nottingham, and people will submit, but they're often engineers or musicians, and while those are perfectly valid, awesome jobs, that isn't the job of a sound designer. It's a different thing. Many people come to sound design from that kind of job, but I think we should talk about what it means to actually be a sound designer and a composer in video games. So if you're a sound designer, your job will entail something to do with making sound effects for games, implementing sound effects for games, recording and editing and implementing dialogue for games, putting the music into games, testing all your work, making sure it all sounds lovely and is mixed well, dealing with surround and all that kind of stuff. Basically, all aspects of the audio that includes, well, depending on the game you're making, machine guns, cars, footsteps, cinematics, Foley, voiceover, UI, all that kind of stuff. So you'll be expected to have a good understanding of creating original sounds from library content or your own recordings, and manipulating it with lots of tools and stuff in a DAW, such as Reaper or Cubase or something like that. A lot of people love Reaper for sound design. And manipulating it, making those amazing sounds that are your own, and then putting those into game and setting up cool systems. You might need to set up a bit of blueprint stuff if you're using Unreal Engine, or at least work with the design team and tech design, and between you set up all those cool audio systems. So that's kind of the core of the job of a sound designer. More so in smaller and indie studios, there'll probably be opportunities to write music as well. So if you're someone that's into writing music, a smaller studio might provide you that opportunity, and you may even get it in a bigger studio, but you certainly shouldn't go into a job that's listed as a sound designer and expect that you'll be writing music. It's generally quite rare. Just kind of, it's important to have that split in your head. If you want to look for a job as a composer in the games industry, it's also completely valid. It's just, it's a different job. So, and there are very, very few in-house composers in big AAA studios. So just bear that in mind. And let's talk about, well, I guess first of all, let's talk about the different sizes of studios. So I'm really going to break this down into three situations. You've got freelancing, which I think I'm going to talk about as a whole different video because there's a lot of different aspects there to cover. Then we got indie studios. So for that, I'm talking about teams of 50 or less people, probably, making games to go on Steam and things like that. And then you got AAA studios, and for that I'm talking about anything from 50 people to 1,000 people spread across the world. So anything from studios that have moved up from being little indie studios into sort of the mid-level, up to like Rockstar, Ubisoft, people like that are huge and make beautiful, huge games with a lot of people. So yeah, if you're in an indie studio, like I said, you can probably expect your role to be a lot more sort of mixed. You'll probably have to do a bit of everything. The general rule of thumb, I'd say, is you get 5% of the studio will be the audio team, I think, doing maths in my head. Basically, if you've got 50 people, one will probably be an audio person. If you've got 100 people, you probably have two, and so on and so on. That's 2%. That is 2%. Yeah, I'm a musician, not a mathematician. So yeah, the team's always fairly small, but they've got a lot bigger over time as games have got bigger and the requirements, like all departments, have got much bigger. You know, if you're making Pac-Man, you can probably have one sound person. If you're making GTA 6, you're going to need quite a lot, probably 30 to 50, I'd say, at a guess. All right, let's break down what the different roles are in the game studios. So if we talk about the different roles in game studios, I will be really doing this from the point of view of the bigger studios, the AAA studios, because if it's, like I said, if it's an indie studio, chances are you'll be doing a bit of everything yourself because of the limited staff, and, you know, everyone has to kind of muck in and just sort of widen their role a little bit. And that's got a huge amount of charm as an opportunity anyway. I mean, anyone who's in a creative role obviously likes a little bit of control and direction of that creativity. So maybe that's for you. I certainly, I'm a bit of a creative control freak, so I love to have a bit of direction on a project. So let's talk about, in a modern games company, what you could expect for all the different roles. Some of these will be condensed down, like if you've got a team of 5 sound people at a studio, then you're just going to have to do a few different things each. If it's a really, really big studio, you can get really sort of granular with these different roles with everybody, right down to maybe someone is doing just ambient sounds or just vehicle handling sounds and stuff like that. It really depends on the size of the team. Let's do this from the point of view of every possible sub-role then. And you may not get to do this specifically if you join a team, but you can certainly make it known that it's an area that you've got some interest in. And if the opportunity presents itself, the audio director will definitely be thinking of you. In fact, before we talk about the sub-roles, we should also probably talk about the different tiers as you get sort of promoted through the ranks of a company. So from the bottom tier is intern. Now, this internships at games companies tend to be very rare in my experience. If you're looking for an internship, please don't let that discourage you. Getting to know an audio team in person is pretty much the best way I think you could try and get your foot in the door. So feel free to try. Generally, though, audio teams are a little bit understaffed and very busy, and we just, with all the good intentions in the world, there's rarely the time to give someone that amount of attention on a day-to-day basis in a games company. But like I say, give it a go. Honestly, what's the harm in trying? So why not? The most junior role is, unsurprisingly, junior sound designer. So that's like the first tier of sound designer. You'll be doing a lot more like support stuff, just designing core assets, mostly things like that, like working on like footsteps and Foley, tagging animations. It's all still really good fun stuff, and it's a great way to cut your teeth, and you need that experience to move up the chain, but you won't be expected to bring too much full ownership of parts of the game. Like wouldn't be that common to say like, okay, this junior sound designer has to deal with all the UI for the entire project, just because it's unfair for someone fairly new to the industry to be taking on responsibility in that way. So you'll probably be working with the regular sound designers, and they'll give you tasks to do on a day-to-day basis, but it's the beginning of a lovely journey, and you have to start somewhere. So that's junior. Next up is the mid-level. It's never really had a proper name. Regular sound designer. I mean, that sounds a bit... it makes it sound, I don't know, a bit humdrum somehow. When it isn't. That's standard sound designer. I guess really you should just call that sound designer, that role. And that's the bedrock of the sound team. If there's quite a few people on the team, that's what most of them will be. And you'll be dealing with all aspects of the game, really, unless the audio director has decided to break you into sort of different sections of work. So maybe you'll be doing a bit of everything, or I don't know, maybe you'll find yourself just doing, like I say, just doing ambience or something like that. And then after that, there's senior, which obviously is the step up from the regular. Senior starts getting a bit more responsibility, probably more meetings and stuff as well, and a bit more ownership of different areas of the game. And you start really having to have some responsibility for the quality and the overall tone of the game. Pushing up from there is a funny one. We now quite often have a split at that point into lead sound designer and principal sound designer. They're ostensibly like the same level, but it's kind of a different focus. Not all companies have this, but I think it's a really clever idea. The lead sound designer will take on a lot of the responsibility of team management and making sure people are getting the stuff done and who's doing what, that kind of stuff. Principal sound designer is someone who has great skill in sound design, maybe composing as well, and but doesn't really want to do all the management stuff as much and would rather just get on with what they're good at, which is sound design. So it's kind of a ring fencing role. So in that, you got lead over here, does all the team management and practical work as well. But then over here, sort of closed off, just doing what they're best at, is a principal. I think it's a really cool idea, and I'm pleased I'm seeing that more and more in games companies. And then over that there's now quite often a new tier of project director before we get to studio director, which is the top tier. So the project director may do all the directorial stuff, but just for one of the games that the studio is working on. So that means that they'll be right at the top of the project, and they'll be steering the identity and the sound and where it's going sonically and all that, and managing the whole team, working with the lead and things like that. But they don't have to do so much of the full studio stuff, which is just leadership meetings, talking to publishers, trying to find new work for the studio, etc., etc. The real top level stuff with the actual studio directors. So it's a pretty clever new tier to add, I think, because it gives them the focus of making sure that one project is as good as possible without being too distracted by the real meta high level studio stuff. So that's pretty much it for the different tiers. I mean, it's different in some companies, and this has already grown a lot over the last 5 years. And like 10 years ago, I mean, there wasn't really much of this like different strata at all in the audio teams. It's generally just some audio people doing audio stuff. So it's all kind of new, and even by the time you watch this, it might be slightly different, but there you go. So let's talk about the specific different types of role that you might be doing in a games company. So let's talk about the actual different subcategories of sound designer that you might possibly find yourself being as time goes on. So first of all, standard sound designer. Now, in a company that's got less than 30 people on the sound team, chances are you'll do a bit of everything, a bit of UI, a bit of Foley, a bit of tagging stuff into animations, maybe some cinematics, things like that. But for the bigger companies, that can quite often just be broken down into individual areas for different people. So maybe you'll be a sound designer, but you just do vehicle sound design, or you just do gun sound design, or you just do UI, things like that. Really depends on the size of the project. And like I said, if you've got something you're particularly interested in, you should always make that known that you have a passion for that area, because down the line that opportunity will probably present itself, and then you can start specializing. And feel like in an increasingly big industry, being a specialist is always a good thing, because you can go back and do general work if that's what needs to happen. But if you're like an amazing UI person, then you're an amazing UI person. You're very hireable for that skill then, and that could be a real passion path that you head down for your life. So yeah, make it known is what I would say. So regular sound designer, that's your meat and veg of the sound department. Something that's a bit more recent, which you see a lot now, is technical sound designer, and that's such an important new role. In the games industry, for the sound team, the bottleneck is never the actual sound design. There's never a point where production are saying, why are you guys so far behind? And the audio guys say, oh, just because we haven't had time to design the sounds. That's never it. The sound design is the beautiful, most fun part of being a sound designer. Unfortunately, actual sound design tends to occupy, if it's occupying 50% of your time, you're lucky. A lot of it is on production, bug fixing, that kind of stuff. But sound designers make time to do the sound design. That's the passion. The problem is quite often in the implementation of that stuff, because it might be code implementation, in which case you need an audio coder. If your company has an audio coder, I mean, audio coders are like unicorns. We're very lucky. We got some very talented ones at Sumo, and especially Sumo Nottingham. And if it's a bit lighter work for setting up your sounds in the game, it might be just done in like Blueprints, which is the Unreal Engine sort of visual modular hookup system. Or if you've got a different engine or your own software, you'll still need somebody with knowledge that's a bit more technical than your average sound designer. So that's where technical sound designer comes in. These are people that can, they have those skills. They're good at blueprints and things like that. And they can take the sounds and actually build those systems for you. So you're not waiting around forever for other departments to hook up all that content, which... and that is the bottleneck most of the time. Like, you build all the stuff, it's beautiful, you can't wait to hear it in game, but unfortunately all the other departments are also slammed, and for some reason audio always seems to be at bottom of the list for the things that are getting hooked up. So you end up waiting a long time, and then even when it's hooked up, it never works the first time. There's always going to be some issues, so that there needs to be that lead time waiting for that, and then having to fix the bugs and get people's time again when it doesn't work as intended. That's a huge drain on time, and it's a big problem. It always has been a big problem. So the idea of a technical sound designer who can take your content, get it working in game, fix the bugs, and keep it on its feet, because unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, once you make stuff in games, it's not just fixed and done forever. You can go back 3 weeks later, and for reasons unknown, it's all completely broken again. So there's a lot of rework and keeping everything going. So technical sound designers, you guys are awesome. I'm so pleased that's now a job. So if you're someone that's into sound, but you're also kind of into technical, more sort of logic aspects of things as well, definitely go for that. There's still a shortage of them. You're seeing more and more in companies now, but it's a great role and very rewarding, because there's still the creative component to it. So next up, this needs to be a fairly big studio. Like, you wouldn't see this in a studio that's got less than 10 people on the audio team, but dialogue editor. This, of course, depends on the nature of your game. If your game has 1,000 lines in it or less, then that's not a lot. You probably don't need a dedicated dialogue editor. You can just get the regular sound team to deal with those assets and get them working and all that stuff. If you have a game that has 20,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 lines of content, you do need somebody managing that content, obviously. So the roles of that person will be working with the design team on the actual script, maintaining it, working with the production about localization, which is translating either just the subtitles into different languages, or the actual audio coming in different languages. So you have to make sure that works. And then there's the actual recording sessions themselves. Chances are you'll need to attend, even if there's an actual director, which there quite often is now for recording sessions. When you go into those VO recording sessions at places like the prestigious Side Recordings in London that do a lot of video game VO, you need to be there, checking through, making sure everything gets done, it's all ticked off and correct, and you'll probably have the opportunity to pipe up if you feel like the performance is going a bit weird and things like that. So, and VO sessions are a really, really lovely part of the job. I've done many over the years, and I absolutely love doing it. Me and my longtime sound design and composer partner in crime, Graham Norgate, we've always enjoyed doing those. They're creatively incredibly rewarding. So if you feel like you might be interested in VO, definitely go for that slant. Then when you get the assets back from the studio, you'll need to edit them, clean them up, maybe using RX or similar tools, just get any last pops and things like that out of it. And then there'll be like sort of in-game processing if it's coming over a tannoy or coming out of a chopper's headset or something like that. You'll have to deal with that. And then I guess then just maintenance of all those lines, making sure it's working. It's hard work, but it's another one of those specialisms that is really sought after. And, you could end up at one of the top studios in the world. People like Naughty Dog and CD Projekt Red, and they'll need a lot of people to deal with the huge amount of dialogue content in their games. So you could end up in a really cool, very prestigious role working on one of the best games in the world. So, another great one to consider. A little side job of that is cinematics, as in attending performance capture sessions where you got all the actors in the suits with all the dots on and the face rigs and things like that. There needs to be an audio presence at those if they're doing like on-set recording. It's quite hard work in that they're pretty frenetic and there's a lot of technical considerations. So it's something you have to approach with a lot of confidence. You've got quite often very high-paid actors there in those scenes, and you can't be messing around for too long trying to get their microphones working. Something's gone wrong. So this role needs a lot of forethought. You need to be very cautious, very prepared, and very fastidious about every aspect of it to make sure on the day everything is as smooth as possible, because that's what all departments on the day need to do. Those sessions are very expensive, very intense, and they need to go well, and the actors need to be relaxed and giving their best performance. It does mean you'll probably be hanging around with actors and stuff, which is pretty cool. I stood in one day for one when I was at Cloud Imperium and got to hang out with Mark Hamill for a day, so that was pretty cool. But yeah, it's a different subset. It's very technical. You probably need to know about Pro Tools and that more sort of cinematic part of the industry. There is also the actual sound design aspect of cinematics that tends to come into the more sound design role. So when I say cinematics in this case, I'm talking about the recording sessions at the performance capture / motion capture events that happen. A new one which always was just done by the audio team, just as a bit of an afterthought in up until like the last 5-10 years, I guess, is haptics, by which I mean like any sort of vibrations in controllers and things like that. The new generation of consoles have really gone for it with the haptics, and whereas previously it was just pretty clunky little motors moving around, so you couldn't get very fine control, the amount of detail and sensitivity in the current generation of consoles is amazing. And so finally you can really get sort of fine finessed control and feedback in those controllers. So more than ever, it's becoming a bespoke job of its own just to deal with that. It's kind of a weird one because it's sort of somewhere between design and the sound team. I mean, a lot of it's driven by the sounds, and usually, like if you have middleware like Audio Kinetics Wise, like it will actually be driven in the audio system. So yeah, it's an odd one. It's a job that's increasingly important, and games are now using it like in ways they never would have done before. People are using it to like simulate the sensation of rain falling and landing on you, or individual footsteps, which would have would have felt terrible in the old just clunky mechanical motor ones. But now that they're so fine and controlled, it feels amazing when you play the game. So it's a whole new thing. I think over time, and as we get into the next generation of consoles, it'll get more and more common to have that as an individual job. Then finally is the music team. Like I said, it's quite uncommon to have in-house composers, but it's not impossible. Teams like CD Projekt Red have in-house composers, and who else? Rare have amazing in-house composers. And so if you're a studio that needs that quantity of music, say you're making quite big games, or you make a lot of games but they all need music, it does make sense rather than working with external freelance composers. But I'd say 9 studios out of 10 will use external composers, but normally because the amount of music you need doesn't justify having someone on a salary for the course of 5 years or whatever it is while you're making the game, which makes sense. You commission individual pieces of music as time goes on, with more of an emphasis as the game starts solidifying. Because you also don't want, if you've got a freelance composer, you don't want to be commissioning music early, then the whole nature of the game shifts and you've spent a load of money getting that music and it's no longer usable. So what you will need, though, is somebody on the audio team who can implement the music. And that's not just a case of taking that track and putting it in. Oh, Alexa, stop. So you'll need someone with some understanding of music on the whole, and they'll need to take those tracks from the composer. Often for new dynamic music in games, you will have asked for a load of like broken individual segments of stems and vertical segments. So they'll need to assemble that in probably middleware like Wise, or could be AFMod, or could be your own systems. And then that needs to be driven by factors in the game, different parameters that make the music rise and fall and filter and change the new sections. So it's a lot to manage, and it's very important in modern games that music feels dynamic and shifting and fresh and following what the player does all the time. So that's quite a big part of the setup of the game in itself. So you might get someone whose pure specialism is just music, getting that music in the game sounding as awesome as possible. Off the top of my head, that's pretty much all the different sections. I mean, if you're watching this in a year, there's probably 2 new types of sound designer that wasn't even a thing at this point. It's changing all the time, and this is based on my experience in the games industry. So other people may tell you some of these roles are less important than I think they are, and there might be other sub roles I've completely forgotten. So if you think of any and you want to mention them in the comments and stuff, like and subscribe, do comments and things, and we can talk about it. And if you have any questions about these, if you feel like I've under-explained some of these roles, please feel free to comment, and I'll definitely reply to your comments. We can chat about it. So I think that's pretty much it for the team. The only other sort of sub aspects of the audio team, which are members of other teams that you have a lot of connection with, would be audio focused producers. So you've got the project management / producer team. There might be one person on that's like a dedicated, they've been assigned music and audio. So if there's someone that's got a really good grasp of audio and music as a whole, they can be incredibly helpful, just sort of taking the weight off your shoulders and making sure that you've got everything you need and it's all going smoothly. And then also for the QA team, which is quality assurance, as in games testers, you'll quite often either have a dedicated audio QA person, which is awesome because it needs testing, or you'll have one person on the QA team who's got a real good understanding of audio as a whole, and they'll be the ones that have they'll be able to debug what's going on if there's a problem at a much deeper level than other members of their team. Incredibly useful. If you haven't done this and you're already in a game studio as an audio person, then definitely try and find out who on the QA team has got most interest in audio, and just sit them down, show them all your systems, get them enthusiastic. They can be a real point person. Actually, that's kind of true for every team anyway. Always find out people on different disciplines that have an enthusiasm for audio and music, and latch onto that. Get them to be like the key point person for their discipline, for design, for art, for animation, and then it's so much easier to keep the communication going if you have that one person that's your point of contact. So yeah. That's it. I think I'll do a whole different video about freelancing, because it's a whole different set of things to think about. I hope this has been helpful. I'm sorry I've been waffling a lot, and I'm sorry Alexa went off and it's a bit rainy outside. I don't know if you can hear that, but I hope this has been useful for you guys, and I'm happy to discuss any part of this. Just comment, and do I hate saying it feels so cheesy, do the likes and subscribes and all that, because I'm going to start doing more of these videos, and I'm happy to do them on any subject you want. Just let me know what would be of interest to you and what's useful, and we can talk about it. Have a good day. Bye.